Thank you, Father. So as Father mentioned, my name is Michael Baird, or Mike Baird, those who may not know me. And also, I'm in my 4th year in the diaconate formation. One of my brothers in formation is here as well, Bill. And God willing, will be ordained this June. So let's start in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to be together. We ask the Holy Spirit to be with us in our conversations this evening. We also ask for your blessings and graces on all of us here this evening and on our families, especially your graces and blessings on the daily food. May we never take for granted your love for us as was shown through your Son, Jesus Christ. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, so in our last year of formation, one of the things that we have to do is a capstone. So for this capstone, and before I talk about that, actually, did anyone get do we have any more handouts? Did everyone get a handout that came in? If you don't, raise your hand. I know we have a limited amount. Philip can give you one. You will also know sort of surveys out there. I didn't have enough from everyone, but there's 2 sides. One's parishioner side, one's if you're a pastor or a staff. So you only have to fill out one of those sides. So for this capstone, each of us are required to choose a topic. And that topic needs to be something that we're not all that familiar with. And at the same time, that topic needs to be something that will continue our spiritual growth, our relationship with God. So for me, it was about a year ago that this came up. And it was actually during Lent. So one of the things I thought about was fasting. What do I really know about fasting? As Catholics, we know that we're supposed to fast on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And we're also supposed to abstain from meat on Fridays during Lent. That's about it. That's all I know about it. I knew a little bit the fact that, when we fast, we're giving up sacrificing in honor and remembrance of Christ suffering on the cross. So I knew a little bit about that. That's about it. So I decided that this would be a good topic for me. And we turned that in to our formators. I told them, these are the books I'm going to read. I'm going to go into scripture. I'm going to delve into the catechism, these different areas. And then after I get all my information, I'm going to actually start practicing the art of fasting. And being the wise person that they are, they're like, no, yes, this is good information, but I want you to start practicing fasting as you go. Don't wait till you think that you know everything about it. So that was really good advice. So I want to start first with a disclaimer. I'm not an expert on fasting. I'm someone who did their homework, took a little time to look into it. And what I want to share with you this evening is what I found in this journey, and then my own personal journey practicing fasting. So I hope that you will see some value in this and maybe have you think a little bit more about why do we fast in the church. So first of all, what is fasting? So fasting in very general terms is just the reduction of food intake throughout the day. So this can look differently. You can either fast completely, not have any food for the day, or like what's recommended for Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, to at least reduce the amount of food you have to 1 meal a day. And then they go on to say, but if you need to, you can also have 2 smaller meals in the morning and the evening to equal 1 meal. So we're not really asked that much. Think about it. We're asked, instead of eating 3 full meals, 2. That's it, and no snapping in between. So the church really isn't asking a whole lot of us in terms of reducing the amount of food we have in those 2 days. And yet, how many of us still struggle with that? Same, I used to. And of course, also, we are to abstain from meat on Friday. So abstinence or abstaining could also mean food, like we don't have meat on Fridays during Lent, Or maybe you give up coffee during Lent. I cannot do that. Or alcohol, like Father talked about. So you're abstaining from different things during Lent. And it doesn't have to be food. It could be social media. It could be hot showers, different things like that. So that's a little bit different, so that makes sense between fasting and abstaining. So fasting actually has become quite popular. It's become the health craze. It's the new diet. It's called intermittent fasting. Maybe not so new, but it's definitely been more popular as of late. So that type of diet basically is to eat only during certain times of the day. So I'm going to eat for 6 hours, and then I'm going to fast for the remaining, 18 hours. Or it could be I'm going to eat one day and fast the next day. But that's not what I'm going to talk about this evening. So I'm not here to talk about fasting as a diet. But I do want to point out there are health benefits from fasting. Some truly physical health benefits. And some of those are intermittent fasting can improve brain function, meaning you have more clarity, a more clear thought process, more focus. Fasting is known to help the heart health. You can have improved blood pressure. Resting heart rates are improved. Fasting is attributed to weight loss. It helps with type 2 diabetes. Fasting can increase the immune system, improve your sugar regulation, and also increase your cell repair. So those are just a few of the things. If you go on the website and look for the benefits of fasting, you'll see a lot of different things come up. And these are by some credible institutions like Johns Hopkins and the Mayo Clinic. So there's a lot of, let's say, bodily, healthy reasons to do that. But I want to talk more about what we call spiritual fasting, religious fasting. We all know we're more than just our bodies, right? We were made in the image of God. So we also have a spirit part to us, a soul. We're more than just biological animals. So when I talk about spiritual fasting, we're also talking about encouraging the health of your soul too. What I mean by that is just developing a deeper relationship with God. That is just as important as a healthy body, if not more. As we know, our bodies will give out on us one day. So we want to keep that soul of ours strong. So as I started to look into fasting, needless to say, there's other religions besides the Catholic faith that practices fasting. And in fact, our fasting tradition is rooted in Judaism. So our ancestors, that started before the Christian faith even began. So the Jewish faith, they emphasize fasting as a means to grow in relationship with the Holy One. And they have 6 regular fast days in the Jewish year. 2 are considered full fasts. They will not have any food or water, and it lasts from sunrise to the following day for about 25 hours. Islam. So the Muslims also practice fasting. In fact, fasting is the third of the 5 pillars of the religious obligation. Their fasting is abstaining also from eating and drinking and sexual relations from dawn to sunset. So throughout the day when they are fasting, they recall God's presence and they seek mercy. Hinduism. So Hinduism, which is the world's oldest religion, will fast for physical and mental purity. Fasting is more personal for the Hindus because they equate that focus on whatever god or goddesses they might want to have their focus on. The Latter-day Saints, or the Mormons, also practice fasting. Traditionally, it's the first Sunday of each month, and it's designated as a fast day. Mormons are supposed to go without food and drink for 2 consecutive meals, so about 24 hours. They fast for increased strength to overcome temptation, and above all, to increase their openness to God's love. Okay, now for Christians, the purpose of fasting, you see a lot of similarities among all these actually. But for Christians, the purpose for fasting is to help bring our focus on God and His love for us. Our prayers during fasting can be a penitential expression. humility before him. So when I started looking into the scripture, and you'll see throughout the Bible, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, there are a lot of references to fasting. And on your handout, I listed, I think, 10 different purposes for fasting. Those were related specifically to these different verses in the Bible. I'm not going to sit here and read all the verses, but I just want to go through and kind of point out a couple of, all of them, but I'm not going to read the verses. So the first one was, the fasting was to strengthen your prayer. Fasting you can use to seek God's guidance. There's fasting to express grief. Fasting to seek deliverance or protection. To express repentance and the return to God. To humble oneself before God. You can fast to express concern for the work of God, for charity. To minister to the needs of others. We can fast to overcome temptation and dedicate yourself to God. And also to express love and worship to God. I really liked reading over this because it gave a lot of different reasons and the purpose of fasting to be focused on. Okay, so let's talk about fasting for Catholics. As I mentioned, it's always been part of the church. It's been part of our tradition from the very beginning. And we always emphasize fasting with prayer and charity. As Father mentioned, I mentioned earlier too, fasting by itself is nothing more than a diet. We want to talk more about the whole self. So, post-Vatican II, the fasting obligations changed. So, in February 17, 1966, Pope John Paul VI issued an apostolic constitution entitled, I'm not going to say this right, I'm going to tell you this already, Anatimony. Is that close? And that means on fast and abstinence. So, in general, what that document said, that the requirement for Catholics for fasting is on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday, and that's a pretty significant reduction of the required or obligatory fasting we used to have. And then also it changed the age requirement. So before then, so the age requirement now is for, if you're 14, you're obligated to abstain. Not fast, you're obligated to start abstaining. So abstain from meat on Fridays. This document at the time said if you're 21 through the age of 59, you're required to abstain and fast. Now, when this came out, it also always allows the bishops of the different countries to make their own adjustments to that. So the National Bishop Conference changed that age from 21 to 18. So here in the U.S. at least, and I think probably in most countries, the age for fasting is 18 to 59. If you're over 59, you're exempt. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. It's just saying you're not obligated according to the church. So does anyone know what the fasting was required before then? What?
Every Friday.
Every Friday of the year was abstaining, not necessarily fasting, but abstaining from meat. What else? Before communion, that's still the same, hour before. Well, it used to be the night before, right? So that changed. Anyone else? So fasting was required all 40 days of Lent. So you were required to reduce the amount you ate. It was also required for all Ember days. Does anyone know what that means, Ember days? Me neither. So what that is, I looked that up. So what that is the first days of each of the liturgical new seasons. So Advent, Lent, Ordinary Time, Pentecost. So at the beginning of each of the season, we were required to fast. There were also some other feast days that were required for fasting as well. So we have a rich tradition. Also, though, in Vatican II wasn't the first time we've changed this. We've changed this over the years, fasting requirements several times over the hundreds of years. So it's just us adjusting to different things. So my question is, so why? Why do we change? In my readings, one of the comments was the idea behind Vatican II and making it not a required or obligatory was try to get away from this legalism of us having to fast because we have to, we're going to follow this rule. And we started losing the meaning behind it, the purpose behind it. We just did it because we were told to do it, right? So the spirit of fasting and abstaining and sacrifice on Fridays, they still wanted that to continue, but it needed to come from us, a desire to do that. So when this came out and these changes came out, the U.S. bishops wrote this following document right away to the people. It said, it would bring great glory to God and good to souls, they wrote, if Fridays found our people doing volunteer work in hospitals, visiting the sick, serving the needs of the elderly, the lonely, instructing the young in faith, participating at Christian, participating as Christians in community, and meeting obligations to families, friends, neighbors, parish with a special zeal. So they wanted the spirit of fasting to continue every Friday, but not because you had to do it, because you want to do that for God. But what did we hear? We all heard, we can eat meat on Fridays again. We don't have to abstain except during Lent. And we kind of forgot all about the other parts of it that was so important. I know I wasn't aware of that. What I also read in the book, and I thought this inspired me in this process, it said, when we have lost the spirit of the practice and are engaged largely, we are engaged largely in a repetition of its form, it is perhaps better that it's lost for a time, so that it can be rediscovered again and embraced once more, freely, with understanding and positive desire. I thought that was a great statement. And that kind of motivated me to really start to dive a little bit deeper. A couple more things in terms of the importance of fasting, which I'm trying to impress upon you. In the Catechism, it states specifically, and it's emphasized fasting as a form of penance in the Christian life. The interior penance of the Christian can be expressed in many and various ways. Scripture and the Fathers insist, above all, on three forms: fasting, prayer, and almsgiving, which expresses conversion in relation to oneself, to God, and to others. And if I had more time, and we don't, in the name of time, then you guys may at least keep this to a certain amount of time. We could talk about how Jesus fasted for 40 days in the desert. I mean, that was huge. And obviously, Lent is coming up. We talk about it a lot. We could talk about how Moses fasted for 40 days twice. He did this twice. We could talk about how the desert monks fast. Very strict in their routine. And the continued fasting practices of the religious and current monks today. But I want to point out there are 5 precepts of the Catholic Church. I don't know if you know what those 5s are. But these 5 precepts is what's required as a minimum for Catholics to really say, yeah, I'm a Catholic and I practice my faith. So this is the minimum. So the first one is, you shall attend Mass on Sundays and holy days of obligation. I think most of us know that. The second one, which I was kind of surprised, is you need to go to confession at least once a year. And I was talking to my brother, my oldest brother is a priest, Father Jim, about this. He's like, yeah, he goes, we know we should go to confession more than once a year. If we don't at least make it a rule, people might not go at all. So we have to have these rules to a certain extent just to get us to go, some of us. The third precept is that you should receive the Eucharist at least during Easter. So the requirement is at least once a year receive the Eucharist. Now, of course, we have the blessing that we can go to Mass every day and receive the Eucharist every day. Some people say we're spoiled. But what a privilege that we have. Again, the church is like, please come at least once a year if you want to consider yourself a practicing Catholic. That seems kind of probably not enough for us. Anyway, the fourth precept, observe the days of fasting and abstinence. It's important. And the fifth one is to help provide the material needs of the church. So we can continue on. I just wanted to point that out because it is important. This fasting, abstinence, much more important than I realized, kind of took for granted and really didn't focus on that. So this was a good learning for me. And one more thing before I start sharing my own personal journey. I wanted to point out that Jesus himself is one thing he pointed out about fasting. It's in Matthew 6, 16 through 18, where he says, "And when you fast, do not look dismal like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by men. Truly I say to you, they have their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by men, but by your Father, who is in secret and will reward you." So this Lent, when you're fasting, don't go whining to your spouse how hungry you are and you couldn't have that meal that day. And don't tell everyone at your work, "Oh, this is such a hard week for me. Sorry I can't go with you. I can't have meat today. You guys enjoy, have lunch." So don't bring that attention to you. That's not about you. It's about you putting your attention on God. And so that's what Christ was really saying. It's not about you. It's about him, right? Okay. So now I'm going to share with my own personal journey through this, and I hope I emphasize the importance of fasting. And again, it's another disclaimer. As I started dabbling with fasting, keep in mind I was at the beginning stages too of my studies. So the longer I went, the more I discovered and the deeper I went. So hopefully when I share with you my experiences, it kind of shows that I was learning on the way. So how to start? So I thought I better ease into this, test the waters a little bit. What's fasting like? I've had past experience with complete fail. So I said, okay, so this week I'm going to fast. First I need a purpose. Okay, I'm going to fast for my capstone to help me get started, to kind of focus on that. And I'm going to do fasting by reducing how much carbs and sugar I eat this week. I'm not going to eat as much sugar and carbs as I normally do. But then on Friday, I'm not going to eat anything. That's going to be a day of complete abstinence. So I made it through the week pretty good. Was able to refrain from carbs and sugars. But then on Friday, didn't quite make it. I had to have that small meal at the end of the day. Just couldn't quite get through it. But that's okay. What it did, it reminded me and showed me very clearly I don't have a very strong will. I couldn't go this one day after a week and not eat anything. Okay, I have some work to do. I need to increase my will. So over the next month, what I would do is try to pick a day here or there. I'm not going to have anything to eat that day. It's going to be complete fasting. Sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't work. And I learned a lot by trying to do this here and there from time to time. What I did learn is if I didn't have a purpose or a reason for that fast, I usually didn't make it through the whole day. I couldn't wake up in the morning and say, today I'm going to fast, especially because yesterday I ate too much. So today I'm going to fast. Most of the times, those I would fail. And I use that word loosely, fail. It just means I didn't obtain what I thought I could do. I didn't make it through the whole day without anything. I ended up having a small meal. That's not a complete failure. That's still fasting. I just didn't do what I had hoped and not have anything. The other thing I learned during this time is that, so I'd say, okay, I have a focus. I know what I'm going to give fasting up for today. It's going to be for my wife or for whatever. I can do that. But it doesn't do me much good unless I actually increase my prayer time. So it's more than just saying in the morning, this is what I'm doing it for. It's a matter of when you're actually fasting. Okay, you're going to skip lunch today. That doesn't mean fill it in with work instead. Instead of 30 minutes for lunch, I can get more work done. I can get more errands done. No, take that 30 minutes and pray. You're skipping that meal to be with God, to focus and pray about whatever intent you have. That was a really good learning for me as well. And then the other thing that I really learned during this is when I was hungry, and I had read this, when I like lunch, my stomach's grumbling, I'm kind of hungry. The one prayer that really helped me a lot is to take that hunger, that physical hunger, and equate that to my hunger for God's love. So when I got hungry, I immediately would start praying to Him and say, God, I hunger for your love. And that really helped me get through this. I'm telling you, this was hard for me. One day was a challenge for me. For some people, it's so easy. They go through the whole day and like, I don't think I ate anything today. I was so busy. That's not me. So this was a challenge, and it was harder than I thought it would be, surprisingly. So some of my brothers from class actually called and said, Mike, I was trying to fast. It didn't work. At the end of the day, I ate so much after I said, yeah. I said, well, one of the things I've done is in the evening when I got really hungry and I didn't think I was going to make it, I'd have a glass of wine. Or maybe, sorry Steve, a diet soda. Or something to get me through that. And that would work. Again, it's okay. You didn't fail. You didn't obtain what you were going for, but I found out I have to kind of build up for this. And that did help me get through it. And then there are other days I was successful at it. Okay. The next thing I thought, okay, I'm going to go. I'm reading more. It's important to pray. And I'm really enjoying this, turning my prayers towards God because I'm hungry. I'm going to do 2 days. And I'm going to not eat anything for 2 days. I've never done that before. But I want to see if I can do this. I got to start practicing my will over my bodily desires. So during those 2 days, I was able to do that. And I focused the first day on God's love, and the second day I wanted to focus on my love for my wife. What I found during those 2 days was kind of cool is that you think that hunger would be distracting? It wasn't. It actually helped me focus. I talked earlier about when you fast, sometimes you have clarity of mind. Truly, I was very focused on what my prayer was. I was more focused at work. I could feel this clarity, this sense of being able to be more prayerful. I remember writing down in my journal, I wrote down, wow, I did 2 days. I've never done that before in my life. How spoiled we are. 2 whole days without eating food. People do that all the time without a choice. It was an accomplishment, a certain extent for me. But I said, some people will be probably impressed with this. Some people probably won't be so impressed with this because I still had my coffee in the morning. When I fast, I still drink my coffee in the morning. But then I wrote, I'm not trying to impress anyone. That's not the point of this. This is my own personal journey and me trying to learn what fasting is about. The other thing I learned too, the next step, so I fasted for 2 days. Keep watching my time. I fasted for 2 days, so then what's going to happen on the third day? I'm going to want to make up for those 2 days, right? I'm hungry. So that's where temperance comes in, right? So fasting is very closely related to temperance. It's a virtue. I don't read the definition. So the virtue of temperance. So temperance is the moral virtue that moderates the attraction of pleasure and provides balance in the use of created goods. It ensures the mastery of the will over instincts and keeps desires within the limits of what is honorable. The temperate person directs the sensitive appetites towards what is good and maintains a healthy discretion. And that's in the Catechism, 1809. And that's important. And temperance in all parts of your life is important, as we know. To have more self-control. We're not animals. We're not just animals, right? We can actually exercise our will over our basic desires. And we should exercise our will over that. Okay. On the side note, so I'm trying these different things, fasting one day, fasting another day. practicing this. If you live with someone, like especially your wife, maybe you should let them know, because she would come to me and like, hey, I got this great recipe I'm going to try out tonight for dinner. I'm like, oh, that's great, honey. I'm fasting today. And she's like, oh, okay, great. I support you. That was difficult, wouldn't you say?
That was also a learning curve for us.
Yes, it was a learning curve of communication. So she wasn't really planning on eating dinner alone that night. And in my mind, I'm doing all these good things. So I just want to throw that out there. Be in communication if you're doing this with your spouse. And I'll eventually, she actually joined me in some of this fasting as well. She got interested and was like, well, I'll fast with you then. We're not going to have dinner together. We both want to have dinner together. I'll fast with you, which was great. The next thing I decided I was going to do, you were leaving for Nebraska. She was going to be gone for a week. She had some important discussions with her family about her father, whose health was declining. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a week fast, just one meal a day, right? And say my prayers for her. And that went pretty well, actually. The first day I had just a small snack in the evening. Second day, snack got a little bit bigger. The third day, got a little bit bigger. By the fifth day, I had pretty much a normal meal. But again, it was just one meal. So I'm still fasting. So this is not an exercise and you keep trying to challenge yourself. You gotta be careful of that. You're trying to go through the process of fasting and keeping the focus. Okay. Then I read this incredible book on this process, on the life of Saint Catherine of Siena. She is the saint of fasting. It was a really beautiful book in the sense that obviously it was supernatural. Her fasting was extreme. By the time she was in her 20s, she no longer even desired food anymore. And in her life, she's known to just be living off the Eucharist. That was her only meal. She would maybe have some water, some herbs, and that was about all she had. And she had this incredible, close relationship with Christ. She would have conversations daily with him, like we're in the room just talking back and forth. This dialogue. And actually there's another book called The Dialogue, St. Catherine of Siena, too. But this really caught my interest because she had this incredible mastery over her bodily desires. Her spiritual director wrote specifically about her and said that, I myself know from experience and believe that anyone can prove it for themselves, that while we are attending to God, we find it easy to fast. But when we turn our thoughts to other things, we find it almost impossible to go on with it. I do not deny that some people find it easier to fast than others, but I do not see how a fast can go on as long as Catherine's did on any natural basis. And then they describe her as the Virgin of the Lord, satisfied though fasting, empty without but full within, dry to look at, but inwardly watered by rivers of living water, and at all times full of life and happiness. I'm just trying to fast for 4 days. See if I can get through that. This woman could do it without even a second thought. And she was also extremely charitable. Again, we talk about fasting, right? Prayer, she was deeply in prayer and connected with Christ. And she's also very charitable, always helping those in needs, especially people no one wanted to deal with. So during this time, reading about her, trying to fast, a couple of things that I experienced. One, I had this dream, which was, I'd say it's kind of cool, but then I say I actually died in this dream, so maybe that's not so cool. But in this dream, I was dead. And there's people, of course, they were sad, they were crying, but I wasn't. I kept telling them, I'm not dead. I don't know why, you know how dreams are weird like that? So I had this dream. But then I saw this man across the room, and he recognized me. I was like, someone finally. And we came up And we just embraced. It was this incredible, like, fatherly, deep embrace. And I remember he was crying, I was crying in my dream. And when I woke up, I still had tears in my eyes, and I was like, that was an incredible feeling. And I focused that day on my fast on that feeling. And I just kind of equated that with Christ, Jesus himself hugging me. Maybe I did die. Maybe that's what's afterwards. I don't know. In my dream. I don't think I really died. I was saying my dream. So, but that was really what they call it consolation, like this feeling that you get sometimes in deep prayer. So that was beautiful. During this time too, I really wanted to focus more on charity. I started getting the prayer thing down pretty good. At least I knew that's what I should be doing. And I wanted to focus more on charity. And St. Catherine of Siena was charity. And so when I pulled up to that intersection, you have the homeless guy there that we see all the time. And unfortunately, we see that more and more now. You know, I rolled down the window, started having conversations. Young guy, his name is Zach. He was walking with a limp, with a cane. Told me how his leg was broken. He was hoping to get having surgery the following month. He's obviously had drugs in him. It's pretty obvious. But I tell you, when I looked in his eyes, I saw Christ clearly. And that was really moving to me. And I thought about Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa could see Christ in every person she met, every person she picked up off the street. She saw the face of Christ. St. Catherine had this supernatural gift of seeing directly into souls. So when you met her, you're not hiding anything from her. She could see directly through your eyes and deep into your soul. It's amazing. It was a really beautiful experience. To remind us that charity is more than just giving someone something, money or whatever, which I did give the kid money, but it's more than that. It's that connection, recognizing Christ in them. So I was able to make the 4 days of fasting. On the third day, I thought, maybe I'll push this to 5. I think I can do that, feeling better. But on the 4th day, I was really still hungry. And I had read, and people had told me, by the 3rd day, your stomach shrinks, you're not as hungry, it's easier. That was not my experience. On the 4th day, I was still hungry. And I really wanted to go to day 5. But by that evening, I got very distracted. I couldn't focus anymore. My prayer was not working well. And so I just said, okay, end the fast. Well, I ended the fast. But I was determined I would try again. Again, I've noticed my body needed to build up to this, for me anyway. One thing I did notice that some habits, my daily habits, were starting to change. I was starting to get a little more mastery over food. I didn't need to always eat when I wanted to. I didn't need to take a snack anymore. It wasn't that important. And there are other parts of my life too I noticed that I could refrain from a little bit easier. So, does that need to be louder? Okay. Yeah, just raise your hand if I start getting too soft in my tongue. So as other parts of my life, I realized that I was, practicing the virtue of temperance. That was helping me. Not only just fasting from food, but whether I don't need to watch that Netflix series. It's not necessary. I'd rather pray. I don't need, to do whatever. So it started to help other areas of my life. So I did try again. I decided I want to do 5 days. So I went and tried a 5-day fast again. This time on the 4th day, it was still hard. I was still struggling. But I did make it to that 5th day. Now on the 5th day, I will tell you that my cravings did subside. I was still hungry, but I didn't have the cravings, if that makes sense. What I liked about the hunger, though, it meant that I was still praying. So every time I hunger, it was like constant hunger, constant prayer. And I thought, I could go longer than 5 days. This is working. But then we had actually planned to meet up with some friends for dinner that evening. So I decided, I will end the Another book that I had read was The Conferences by Cashin. And he did a lot working with the Desert Fathers and learning their habits and their traditions. And one of the things these desert monks did, they fasted, they did extended fasts. But if they had a visitor drop by, they stopped the fast immediately and shared a meal with them. And they would actually share the food that they were saving up for after their fast. So that's charitable. That's charity. That's sharing together. So there are reasons when you're fasting to stop that for a good cause. After this, I started to meet with Father Brian a little bit. Started talking to him about my fasting experience, what I was going through, and how I wanted to focus more on charity. And he loaned me a book called Charity, which was very helpful reading through that. It's very in-depth. I couldn't read the whole thing, just certain areas of it. I don't know if you read it, but the charity is that other important part that's connected with fasting. And charity is the theological virtue by which we love God above all things for his own sake, and our neighbor as ourselves for the love of God. It is referred to as the supernatural friendship between man and God. Beautiful explanation. So as I focused on this, Father also gave me another book. It was the Essential Sermons from St. Augustine. And it's a series of all these sermons that St. Augustine did. It's really good. And I just kind of pinpointed because I was studying fasting and the reason for that. So right before Lent, St. Augustine wrote this. So this is a great timing for us. He said, "It goes well with our devotion, after all, that as we are very soon going to celebrate the passion of the crucified Lord, we should also make a cross for ourselves out of curbing, of the pleasures of the flesh." Again, he was talking about fasting, abstaining, getting ready for Lent. He also goes on to write, I thought this was a good point, "None of us, under the pretense of self-denial, should make a point of changing rather than cutting back on our own pleasures." Now, what I took that as being meant is you don't replace something with something else. An example would be that on Fridays, I used to do this, can't have meat, right? I'm going to go and get a grilled fish sandwich with fries and a soda, because I normally wouldn't do that. But I can't have meat today, so I'm going to do that instead. Is that a sacrifice? Or, hey, hon, we can't have meat today. Let's go to a restaurant and have this night. I love this place. It's great sushi. Is that fasting? So what he's saying is, don't change your routine or replace it with something else. Fast. No, take a step back. Suffer a little bit. Sacrifice. I thought that was a really good point. Okay, so my wife and I then decided, hey, as we learn and go deeper, and as I'm learning more about this, and really praying more and experiencing a deeper devotion to God, why don't we try a whole week? You're going to do it with me, so we're going to do a whole week of fasting, no food for 7 days. But I didn't know what I wanted to do it for. What would be my focus this time? So again, I was talking to Father Brian, and he made a good comment. He goes, especially in today's world, we tend to focus on ourselves, right? So even when I was fasting, it was always something for me, or for my wife, or for my family, or for my friends. He's like, focus on something else, not just in your small group. So we concluded that I was going to pray, I decided, for the church, for the Catholic Church. Like Daniel did in the Old Testament, he prayed for the Israelites and asked for penance, for forgiveness of all the sins that they've done. So say, okay, I can do that. So my first 2 days, I dedicated my prayer time, my focus on praying for the church. And I wrote this in my journal, this prayer that I thought of during this. And I'll just share this with you, if that's okay. My prayer went, may God forgive the many errors made by his people of his Catholic Church. Forgive your people, Lord, for our weaknesses, for not obeying your commandments. Forgive those with authority who misuse the trust placed on them, the scandals that happened. Forgive your people, O Lord, and help us to cling to your teaching, the church's teachings that lead us to your Son, Jesus Christ, with great humility. You remind us that without your grace, this cannot be done on our own. Forgive me when I do not follow your will. Have mercy on us, Lord, as we show mercy to others. May my hunger today remind me again of my hunger for your love and for your church. Forgive your people, O Lord. Have mercy. And may we truly show you our sorrow for our sins. We are nothing without you. Humble us, O Lord, so we can serve you properly and your church. So day 3 was All Saints Day. It happened to fall on Saints Day. So I prayed with the saints. And I also prayed for unity in the church. Right? There's so much division, even within our church. Kind of getting tired of it. I don't know if anyone else is. So I pray for unity. We are one church. We are one faith. On day 4 and day 5, then I prayed for vocations. I especially prayed for my brother, Father Jim. I prayed for the priests here. I prayed for Deacon Daryl, Deacon Tom. Prayed for all the deacons. I prayed for my brothers in formation. And continued that focus. Then on day 6 and day 7, I really focused on praying and contemplating on Jesus' passion and how he left us the church, how the church began. At this point, on day 6 and day 7, the hunger became a constant companion. It was just there. And it was okay. I was okay with it. I was praying. It brought a heightened awareness. That was my journey. I don't really want to share a little bit. What was your focus on those 7 days?
I feel like my focus was more like what a mom would do. They would focus. I feel like our prayer requests come at us like a tidal wave, and we're constantly being asked, and obviously we want to, pray for somebody's needs. So I could not do something so big like you were doing. I felt like I was being asked to pray for all those things under the umbrella of what you were praying for. So I just felt it. I mean, it probably happens every single day that we get a tidal wave of asks for prayers, but during that 7 days, I felt like they were especially pronounced.
Yes.
So I felt like they were just those things. I had a focus every day, but then more just came.
And you also shared with me that Mary is a big part of your journey, right?
Yeah.
So I think she also had a beautiful experience for that as well. On day 7, though, I have to say, we had formation that Saturday. We're in choir practice at the end of the day. And I was not feeling very good on day 7. But I knew there was a wedding coming up. I was very excited to attend. Your daughter. So, and that was going to be our first meal after 7 days. I started so dry. I was like drinking water and starting to sweat. I was getting lightheaded. And I was like, ah. And I was trying not to let anyone know because I don't want people to know I'm fasting. So just some prayers. Lord, get me through this. Food is right around the corner. Get me through this choir practice. So he did. So I had no problem eating at all at the reception. Great food, thank you. And the next day I had full 3 meals. I learned a valuable lesson. When you fast for 7 days, your digestive system shuts down. It stops. It becomes dormant. The bacteria in there decreases significantly. So when you do an extended fast like that, you don't just start eating again. I was miserable. Miserable. And I won't go into too much detail. But it was a really rough day. I missed work, and I took that suffering and placed it with God on the cross. It was like, this is true physical pain. I learned a very good lesson. And I did have information about extended fast, so I went back and read that again. So, I wanted to do another extended fast. And this time I wanted to do it for my brother's information. There's 21 of us. So 20 brothers. Yeah, I'm not going to do a 20-day fast. That was not reasonable. But I thought maybe if I did 2 a day, that would be 10 days. Maybe I could do a 10-day fast. Did a 7-day fast, would be pushing it a little bit more. I think I could do this. And I just felt like things were coming fruitful on this. So I started that. The same time my wife was having foot surgery, so she was going to be laid up, let's say, in the room for a while. This made it really a difficult challenge for me. People would bring the most delicious food for her and for me, not knowing I was fasting. And I would take this food and have to prepare it for her and serve it to her, but I couldn't have it, which was great. That was good for me. Again, practicing my will over my bodily desires. I was able to do this. I went 7 days, made to that 7th day again. And I tell you what I did experience a little bit on that 7th day. I don't know if I explained this very well. On the 7th day, interesting, it's the 7th. I never thought about that. It's the 7th day. Anyway, on that 7th day, I definitely felt not a separation, but a distinct difference between my body and my spiritual self. This heightened awareness spiritually. My body was tired, it's hungry. I was really enlightened spiritually. I could see that I see this separation now between the body and the soul. How we are joined together, but there is something separate from it. It's the best way I can explain it. Then on day 8, I was starting to struggle on day 8. I noticed during work, I was taking deep breaths throughout the day, like, that kind of thing. It's like, okay, that doesn't seem probably all that healthy. Starting to get very tired, didn't have much energy. I was like, oh, come on, Lord, 2 more days. I only have 2 more days for my brothers. But right before I left work, I had some more water. I was actually getting nauseated, which I never had that experience before. So it's like, I don't know. So I get home and Marilyn's like, oh, you look terrible. You don't look good. Your eyes are sunken. I think maybe you should have something. So I did. I had a small meal, a small snack. But I wasn't going to end my fast. It's just I couldn't go without food, continue to go without food. So I had a small snack. And then I was able to finish my fast. On day 9, I had a small snack, and then on day 10, I was done. So I was able to get all my brothers in during that time. So to start wrapping this up. One, thank you for letting me share my personal journey. I appreciate that. And I just wanted to share with you my experience of it. Your experience could be totally different. But I would encourage you, this Lent especially, try fasting. And really think about making sure you just have that one meal. Now, I'm not a doctor. Some people shouldn't fast. They may have severe diabetes. Check your doctors for health. As far as extended fasting especially, I'm pretty sure we can all skip a meal. Most of us, not everyone. But just be aware of that. So my personal journey showed me some pitfalls, but more importantly, it showed me the beauty of practicing fasting along with prayer. So it did contribute to my personal prayer life in a couple of ways. One, I was much more focused in prayer and much more clarity. And even preparing for this talk, my wife and I fasted. I was fasting and I was walking and I was thinking about, I was getting hungry, and I was turning to God once more and say, God, I hunger, but I hunger for your love. And then I got that image that we can all picture sometime with him on the cross. He's kind of looking down. And I was like, what if he was hungry? What if he was hungry, suffering so much of that? Was he hungry? And I got this overwhelming feeling. He's like, yeah. And I'm hungry for you. He hungers for you. He hungers for your love. That's why he was on that cross, right? It's powerful. The other thing that influenced was my prayers, is they were more constant during the times of fasting. I was more aware, more prayerful during that time. I think it's important to point out that you could do spiritual fasting for the wrong reasons too. So just want to make that clear. I already mentioned you could do it for dieting purposes. That kind of defeats it. When I was speaking with Father Dennis Brown, who's one of our, who's our spiritual director for us, he said, "Oh yeah," he goes, "I love fasting." He goes, "I was going to fast like the desert monks. I was only going to have bread and water every day." He goes, "That was wrong." He's like, "One, I'm not a desert monk. I'm not called to that." And it became more of an athleticism practice. Could I do this? Could I push myself further? And I too had to take a step back every once in a while. Am I just trying to be further the last time just to prove to myself I can do it? Or am I doing this truly out of a purpose and going deeper in my prayer? So be aware of those snares, I would call it. And I also want to encourage you not to become too scrupulous about the details of fasting. You can go in and say, okay, what does one meal really mean for a guy who's 250 pounds and for this woman who's 90 pounds? What does that mean for a full meal? And what do these two small meals exactly weigh to equal one meal? Don't do that. You know what a normal sized meal is? Eat a normal sized meal in those days, just one. Don't become too scrupulous over all the rules and things around it. I will add this in too. So during this process, as I drew closer in my relationship, I learned to trust him, and we continue that path, right? We all want to trust what he wants for us. So I was open to his will as I gained mastery over my own will, over my bodily desires. I try to be open more to his will. And little did I know during all this time, he was calling me not only to the diaconate, but I ended up switching jobs. I left my secular job and now I work for the Archdiocese. And this happened during this time, and I don't think that's necessarily a coincidence. I think he was asking me to trust him like he always does, and to be open to his will, and learn to put my ideas behind all of that. So thanks for listening to my story. Let fasting help you let go of your worldly desires and draw you closer in relationship through prayer and increased charity. So God bless. If you have any questions, I'm happy to.
In regards to the church's decision with Vatican II, not so much whether it was a good decision or a bad decision to reduce the obligations for fasting, but what are your opinions on the overall effect to the church?
I think, like I mentioned, I really think that decision, unfortunately, people forgot about the tradition of fasting and the meaning behind it. And I think we end up focusing on those 2 days of fasting and kind of forgot about the tradition, this deep tradition that we would have every Friday as some form of penance. And even though the bishops followed with that statement, it didn't take. People like, I don't have to do it, I'm not going to do it, unfortunately. But that's why I like that statement. It's like, we need to rediscover this tradition. And we need to do it not because we have to, because the church tells us to. We need to do it because it's something we desire to. And we want to recognize every Friday is Christ on the cross and prepare us for every Sunday, which is his resurrection. So that's my.
Yeah. I was also thinking, like, from a self-control perspective, even if you're doing it for the wrong reason, there's still some value there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe the church has lost some of that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
No, I agree. I agree. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for your time. I'm curious, you mentioned your dreams, but I'm curious if your sleep was affected in terms of length of sleep or waking up in the middle of the night or anything along those lines.
Good question. Nothing stands out. I think
He's a good sleeper.
I'm a good sleeper. Even before fasting. It didn't have too much effect. I think there were some nights I had a little harder time sleeping, but then I would just kind of turn to prayer. But in general, I guess it didn't have that big of an effect on me. You would think so if I had these vivid dreams. It means usually you're not sleeping as deep, right? But I didn't notice being tired until I was fasting day 6, day 7, then I
I may have missed the very first part, but during your fasting period, how long of a time was that? Not like your 7 days, but this whole journey, how long was that for you?
So I started fasting probably trying this up right 8 months ago. So it's been off and on for 8 months. Some months were just that beginning where I was trying to do 1 day here, 1 day there. So yeah, it's probably been close to 8 months. Yeah.
How did it affect your day-to-day job? Did you get any feedback from coworkers, bosses?
No. So,
Good for you.
no, they didn't know. They didn't know I was fasting. I tried to make sure they didn't know.
I would have been grumpier than usual.
Oh, I didn't bring that up. That's a really good point, actually. My wife and I did experience that. Yes, hangry is a true emotion. And that would happen sometimes on day 2, day 3. In fact, we got this, we were so grumpy at each other one night. And then the next morning, we like, I think we were hangry. Yeah, we were definitely hangry. But knowing that emotion comes up, then you recognize it and you're okay with it. But yes, I even wrote that in my journal about hangry.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah.
One of the beauties though of that is at the end of the night when you just think you can't do anymore and you go to bed, you wake up the next morning with just even that much more determination and willingness to dig in. So God gives you that strength for the next day. I don't know if you experienced that, right?
Yeah, the mornings were always, I loved waking up in the morning with an empty stomach, honestly. I love that feeling. But,
Did you find yourself drinking more water all the time to kind of fill
yes,
yourself?
drinking water is important. You know, some fasting you can do for a day or 2 and you don't drink any water. For me, I had to drink a lot of water. It was important. I would get dehydrated. if I
Were you
didn't.
ever at a point where you felt so much hunger that you didn't think you could go on the next day?
Yeah, and then I ate.
Okay.
As I learned. Back here.
Same question.
Oh, same question? Okay.
I've heard hunger described as like a wave, where it's like we think it's gonna grow and grow and grow, but it's actually like a wave that will wash over us and pass. Did you experience that?
Yeah, it builds. I agree with that. It does build over the first couple of days, for me anyway, then it does subside into the background a little bit. I didn't quite that more with craving though. There's a physical hunger, but it's this psychological craving of food that you're used to getting when you want it. That's what helped a lot. The one thing I didn't mention either, that I want to mention is that fasting period before receiving the Eucharist, right? You know, it used to be the tradition of you didn't eat the night before until you received communion the next day. And now it's 1 hour. And then, of course, us being Catholics, what does that mean? 1 hour before Mass or 1 hour before you actually receive communion? Because we're not scrupulous at all. Technically, it's 1 hour before you receive communion is what I heard, but make it 1 hour before Mass. Come on. We can do this. We're so ridiculous. Don't eat breakfast. If you're going to go Mass in the morning, try skipping breakfast. You know, one of the most beautiful things when I did fast, sometimes my very first meal was receiving the Eucharist. And that was a very special to me. It was a really cool anticipation and awe. That was beautiful. Any other questions? Yes, Father.
Great job. A couple comments and then a
Corrections.
But I loved how you centered temperance with that fasting and temperance, and just what I love about the virtue of temperance is that if you're going to attack one area, you're attacking all of them, right? So the other two main points of temperance would be sobriety, so alcohol, and then chastity for touch or sex. And if you're struggling with one area of temperance, you're going to struggle with all of it. But if you fight against one area, you're fighting against all those areas. And so the moderation of our pleasures, and fasting is a great way to do that, because it's always in front of us. Food is always present. When you were talking, just the beatitude comes to mind. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Right? We hunger and thirst for His love. So I thought that was beautifully worded and articulated. And I love how like you have the intellectual side of it, but then also like here's the my own personal experience of it too. I thought that was beautifully done. The question would be concrete recommendations. If you have any, for example, one of the priests, Father Angel in seminary, he would always tell us you should never leave a meal without fasting from something. And so he would always give the example of like maybe the salt, maybe the butter, you know, just we're always constantly feeding ourselves. Could you just deny yourself one thing in that meal? Which I'll be honest is like incredibly hard to do. So yeah, practically speaking, not just like the big 10-day fast, do you have any other concrete recommendations for it?
Yeah, for me, it was interesting. For me, it was almost, let's say, easier if I knew I wasn't going to have anything that day than have to figure out what I was going to do that day differently. Like having one meal or maybe not have this or that. This is my own personal experience. It was easier for me, oh, I'm not eating today. I don't have to think about it. That was me. I don't necessarily, again, I really struggled though with just doing one day. I can do one day pretty easily now, but at first it was a struggle. But I kind of like the recommendation of the church, try one meal. And see how you do with one meal. And if you have to have the other two, or maybe one smaller meal, start with that. But challenge yourself a little bit, if you can. But don't say, okay, some of you young guys are like, I'm gonna do 10 days. I got this. Maybe you can, but that's not the point, right? You wanna kind of learn that deeper prayer as you go. So practical for me is reducing food by eating one meal, I guess, would be my suggestion for fasting. You just need to decrease. I mean, again, the general term for fasting is decrease the amount of food you would normally eat. Yeah.
I have a challenge for you,
Okay.
a true challenge.
Okay.
I have a daughter, as you know, with Down syndrome, who doesn't feel like she should ever have to give up any food at any time. She said, I'm not overweight. I need to eat every morning. So we have tried every which way, and she eats morsels.
Right.
But we said, Casey, during Lent, we're gonna give up a meal. One meal a day. She said, does that mean I can go get a, what's she call it? One of these frosty drinks, that'll be my meal. I said, no. No, we're not gonna do that either. So, I guess, I'm sorry to put this on you, but I just don't know how to get across to her how we need to give up one thing, one day, one week. I mean, we don't give it up every day.
Right.
Our good friends are Mormon,
Right.
and they give up the whole day without bread. They do bread and water. And she said, but I don't need to lose weight.
Right,
And I
well,
said, it's not weight.
yeah, it's not about the weight. So
No.
the only thing I would recommend for
Have her come and
Casey-
live with you during
Yeah,
Lent,
yeah.
can I?
But I
There's a
work with
challenge.
Casey, instead of approaching saying, we're gonna eat one less meal, but instead, replace that one meal you're not gonna eat, and we're gonna pray.
With her.
So replace it with something prayerful. And let her know you're giving that meal up for all those kids who don't have meals every day. And you're giving that for Christ. And you're giving up, and then if she feels hungry, like I said, I always like equate that with hunger for God's love.
With
That's
what?
her own
Yeah.
hunger for God's
Yeah.
love. So maybe that worked, I don't know.
If not, I'll
Casey
send her
can
to
be
your
stubborn,
house.
so.
Can I send her to your house? Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions at all? Well, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.